Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the FAC Regional Workshop. The topic to be covered today is wind mitigation. My name's Rod Clouser. I'm a professor here at the University of Florida, and these video conferences are co-sponsored by the Florida Association of Counties and the University of Florida IFAS Cooperative Extension. We want to welcome you to one of our facilities throughout the state. If you've never attended a video conference before in one of our facilities, we'd like to welcome you today. We hope you find it enjoyable. We have a great video conferencing system, and we use it quite frequently. And while it's great and very good, I also want to remind you that it's not perfect. And we originate through our control room up here in Gainesville, where we have staff available who can help provide assistance if we have glitches during the video conference. But if that happens, just hang with us and we will get them corrected. This is the 5th or 6th video conference that we've had in this format. We usually have about 30 people in attendance. Today we have 5 sites. There's attendance at 4 of the sites, but the majority of the attendance is in Taylor County and in Quincy. And it's a nice technology in the sense that you can have groups of people together without having to drive long distances. Our speaker today will work such that he will do a portion of his presentation, then go to a question and answer session, which I will facilitate. And with those few comments, I'm going to turn it over to Latrez Gooding, who's Director of Educational Programs for the Florida Association of Counties, who's at the Quincy location. Latrez?
Thank you, Rod, and thank you again to all the IFAS locations. We so appreciate you all doing this. I think this is the 5th time we've done this in the last few years, and we greatly appreciate all of your efforts in making this happen. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar today on wind mitigation. This is kind of a first of a series of programs that we're doing on this topic. Eric Poole will tell you a little bit more, but last year he worked with the Division of Emergency Management and received a grant for us to offer these programs. So we're excited to be able to bring them to you and bring them to you free of charge thanks to that grant. We do have 4 different locations as of now within where the webinars are being housed. But we do have a few housekeeping items. If I can ask everyone to turn your cell phones to vibrate or off for me, just because we will be live with all the different locations and they will be able to hear it also. And commissioners that are in attendance will get 3 hours of elective CCC credit. We will be passing out sign-in sheets. There's one in the back, and so you do need to stay here for the entirety of the program to get that credit. We will end at noon today and take breaks throughout. Frank will just kind of take breaks when there's a natural stopping point in his program today. So with that, we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce Eric, who's our Assistant Legislative Director, Eric Poole, with the Florida Association of Counties. So Eric, come on over.
I hope everyone can see me. We had to adjust the microphone because your presenter today is about twice as tall as I am. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming out and taking some time out of your busy schedule to participate and to learn what we hope is a very interesting and valuable topic for you. As background, what I wanted to just let folks know is one of the things we've tried to do is, with the CCC program, is to bring emergency management type courses to our members. We've been successful in doing one in August course for our membership. And then what we wanted to do is begin focusing on some of the other aspects and phases of emergency management with a strong emphasis on mitigation and disaster prevention. And so thanks again to a grant from the Division of Emergency Management, we're able to bring this course to you. One of the things that we want to focus on in this course, and the instructor, Mr. Koutnik, will talk about that, is really the funding sources that are out there. Very often, the funding that comes available either from the state and primarily the federal government gets left at the table. It either gets sent back to FEMA or some other community gets access to it. So what we want to really emphasize today is that there's a lot of funding sources out there, things that prevent disasters in your community, Our focus today is going to be on wind. Hopefully in the future we might be able to do something on flood mitigation, but today's course is going to be on wind. And the emphasis is not simply protecting also business. In order for your community to come back economically, there are ways to access funds to ensure that in a high wind event that those businesses don't get destroyed, or that at least the damages are minimal and they can come back quickly. So sort of a sustainability component to some of the discussions today. So with that, I'm going to introduce Mr. Koutnik. Mr. Koutnik is a veteran in the emergency management world. He worked for the Florida Division of Emergency Management for about 27 years, and then after leaving the state of Florida, he did a lot of work in the private sector, a lot of Homeland Security work. I've known Frank for quite a long time, and he literally knows just about every aspect of emergency management, from training, preparedness, response, recovery. And then when he was with the state, I think one of the last things that he really focused in on was disaster prevention and mitigation. And so with that, I want to introduce Mr. Koutnik for our course today. Frank?
Thank you.
The microphone's at the right height.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, and welcome everybody. As Eric said, I'm extremely pleased to be able to offer this course or share the little bit of knowledge I've got in this field with you. The goal today is going to get you, we're going to stay at the 10,000 foot level. I'm not going to get down into the nitty-gritties of the variety of programs that we're going to be talking to you about today. But there's points of contact, and we have two representatives here from the Florida Division of Emergency Management that are going to be able to answer very detailed or specific questions that I may not be able to answer for you. As Eric said, my last position with the Florida Division of Emergency Management was the Bureau Chief of Recovery and Mitigation. Since that time, those bureaus have been split apart, and now there's a Bureau of Recovery and a Bureau of Mitigation. So you're here kind of under the auspices of the Bureau of Mitigation, the Residential Construction Mitigation Grant. So really, we want to thank wholeheartedly not only the Florida Association of Counties, but the Florida Division of Emergency Management for making this possible. So with that, let's just go ahead and jump into the presentation. This first part is more of an overview, historical look at the impacts, previous impacts of wind in the state of Florida. The goal of this initial session is to whet your appetite to really pay attention to anything you can do to reduce your vulnerability to wind in your county. Because when you see what wind will do to your county, for you veterans that have been around a while, you know this. For you folks that are newly elected or in new positions with your particular counties, you may not know this. My term with emergency management, the first large disaster that I had to have responsibility with, at that time I was the operations chief for the division, responding to Hurricane Andrew. So that's how far back I go, and actually I go about 5 years prior to Hurricane Andrew. So what we're going to do today, and I'll walk you quickly through this agenda, and as Rod said earlier, there will be natural breaks in the presentation today and opportunities for you to ask questions. As we move along, if you have a question, jot it down, because we'll have natural breaks for you to ask those questions. It's impossible for you in the field to ask these questions live because of the limitations of this system, so we'll make plenty of opportunity for you to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to bypass the course introduction. We'll be doing participant introductions because we'll be doing that when we're in a live setting outside of the teleconferencing. I'm going to go through the expectations with you. I'm going to convince you that this is a very valuable course. We're going to look at risk and vulnerability analyses for the state, and particularly, and you can apply this to your county. We're going to look at 3 hurricanes and the impacts that they had on this state. Now, when we say this state, what are we really talking about? We're talking about 67 counties and how many cities? 465 cities, all the unincorporated areas of the communities. So when I say state, I'm really talking 67 counties. So we're going to look at the impact of what 3 hurricanes did to your counties. Then we're going to spend a good portion of the time, and really the reason why you came here today is to look at these county plans with mitigation components, okay? You have in your counties about 5 different plans that address mitigation. You may or may not be aware of that. You will leave here today with an awareness of what those particular plans are and your influence or input that you can have into them. We're going to look at some funding streams, some federal/state funding programs, actual programs that help you with all forms of mitigation. Obviously today we're focusing on wind. And then we're going to look at 2 particular areas in state statute that you don't have a lot of control over, but I want you to be aware that they're there because they have large impacts on wind mitigation. And you'll see that when we get to that point. We're going to look at 3 success stories just to show you that this is for real. There'll be real live actual examples of what communities have done, taken advantage of the funding that Eric originally talked about. Then we're going to wrap it up, and at the very end of things, you'll be sent an evaluation form, and we really would appreciate your cooperation in completing that evaluation because it will help us do this course more. We got 4 more courses we're going to be doing with this. This is really, you're the guinea pigs, you're the pilot. So we're really depending on you and all of you folks out there in the annexes counties to help us perfect this course, make it more realistic and offer it to more people. All right, we're going to look at why is this course important? Well, I hope that when you leave here today, you're going to say the reason it's important is because we're going to show you how to take full advantage of everything through the plans, through the funding programs, and through the issues in statute to take full advantage of that to your benefits. What it's going to require on your part is some initiative. You will have to leave here motivated to want to at least look at this at your local level. Locally, all of you have an emergency management director. Most of these programs are housed in that person's office. Not all of them, but most of them. They understand this process, or they may not. And that's why not only this PowerPoint, but you also, if you went online and downloaded the materials, pre-read materials, you have a really good handbook that summarizes in much greater detail the things that are on these slides. So I encourage you, if you've not downloaded that handbook, to please do that. All right, so that's why this course, that's why I hope to convince you that this course is very, very important to you. All right? The things that are very applicable to this are these 5 different questions. We're going to break down everything we do today. If you've looked at your handbook, every program that is identified addresses these 4 questions right here. And I thought that when we developed this thing format-wise, I wanted to create something that was consistent across all programs. And we look at the things like, what are the requirements? What are the wind mitigation requirements? What is the method of implementing the plans, programs, or provisions of the legislature? What, if any, are the incentives? Is there funding available? And we'll show you where those pots of money reside. What is the potential wind mitigation benefit for the county? That's the real key question right there is, why waste your time to even get into this? I hope to convince you today that it's worth your time to, if not you, give this to somebody in your county that will take this by the horns and really learn this stuff. Because there's availability of programs out there that can help you. And of course, the success stories. The objectives today are very simple. I want you to walk away with an awareness of what these programs are and what they can do for you. If you left with nothing else but that, I would consider what I've done a success. I want you to understand the hazards that you're facing. Those of you that are involved in your local comprehensive emergency management plan will understand this, because that and the local mitigation strategy, between the two, you have an exhaustive vulnerability analysis for your counties. Both of those plans exist in your counties right now. But I'm just going to touch on some of the statewide hazards and the potential impact that they could have for you. And we'll do that through examples of previous events. I want you to learn how to take full advantage and to implement appropriate wind mitigation opportunities. All right? That's my objective. I want you to leave here understanding how the funding works and where to go get it. Maybe it's in a cycle. Well, you need to understand how that cycle works. You need to understand where the applications come out at. How do you tap into it? How do you take advantage of it? And I want you to understand the benefits to your county. So basically, it's a reiteration of the agenda, but by statute. All right, this is really where we're going to jump into some of the historical information. Every slide you see here is Florida specific. The one that you see up here is the one when, after the first impact of Hurricane Andrew, when we flew over South Dade, this is what you saw. This is one of many trailer parks. This one here had 1,000 mobile homes in it. 995 of them look like this. All right. What's the average occupancy rate? About 2.3 times 1,000. In this one block right here, you had thousands of people displaced instantly. What do you do with something like that? Who are they going to look to when this happens? They look to the, I don't know how many commissioners Miami has, about 13 or 17, somewhere up in the teens. Well, they look to them. This is real. This is what can happen. This is wind. This is not hurricane storm surge. It is not a tornado. This is hurricane oriented. And most of the stuff I do today is going to be hurricane focused because, one, we're approaching hurricane season, and two, it has the most dramatic impact on your county, and three, Florida is the most vulnerable county in the nation to receive a hurricane. All right. This is just one of many communities destroyed. This one, I'm sorry, I said it was Miami, it was Homestead. All right. You all know where this is. This is over, I believe, in Walton or Okaloosa, somewhere over there. Of course, that's 90. That washes out all the time. All right. The surge is a function of wind. Although this is water destruction, the surge that hurricane generated, surge is nothing more than wind pushing water forward. So even by default, even though this is a water-oriented type of destruction, it was caused by wind. What do? The lifelines were severed. How do you get in here? I remember we went over here and we literally stood on this side and took the picture going that way, and what DOT did was instantly had to fill that in. And by the time they got there, there was quite a little inlet that had, it ended up being about 10 feet deep by the time DOT got in there to fill this in. Because Mother Nature wanted to create a nice little inlet right there. All right? Business disruption. Economic engine of your county. In Hurricane Andrew, there were thousands of businesses that were impacted, 25% of which never came back online. What would that do to your county? What would that do to your facilities there? I stood at the base of this boat thing. That was near Homestead on the 18-mile stretch. It was, what a horrible thing to see, all these Chris Craft boats that were just smashed. Looked like some giant had come in and just put their foot on top of this facility and just squished it down. So you can have all kinds of impact, all kinds of injury. Buildings with glass blowed out. Although totally repairable, them plus thousands of other facilities are vying for the same resources to repair them. So any opportunity to mitigate this kind of destruction should be of interest to you. I'm just showing you what these events can do. All right? Had many a meeting with the good Mr. Tort down here in, that's Pensacola's City Hall. Of course, not the best place to have a city hall so close to the water, but again, that facility was put out of commission. They had to COOP, which is continuity of operations. They literally had to move their facilities and operate for 2 years at another site. All right, so things that you have to consider. In Hurricane Wilma, 98% of all business were without power for some up to 20 days. And you're going to see here in a minute that also equated to 6 million plus people without power, some for 4 weeks. All right, tremendous impacts that these things can have. All right, what if you could, and you had a way to control the amount of impact that you have on the public and private infrastructure? That's the key. That's what drives your county. This is what makes things happen for you. This is where your tax base is. These are the people who elect you. What if you could do something that would reduce the impact on your residents that live in your counties? Would that be of interest to you? I hope so. And if you could reduce your overall county risk and vulnerability to future disasters, would that interest you? That's why you're here. All I'm doing is painting a picture of why you're here. And I want to read a little excerpt to you that comes out of what was called the Lewis Commission. It was a commission that was, Senator Lewis at the time had just come out from being the Senate President, Phil Lewis. And the Florida Division of Emergency Management asked him to pull together a blue ribbon committee. And they produced a report called basically the Lewis Report. It's still online. You can still go to the Florida Division of Emergency Management's website in library, scroll down, and this document is still there because this document truly changed the face of emergency management, not only in Florida, but across the nation. It was an amazing look at, this is where the idea of the Emergency Management Trust Fund was generated. The main complaint that people heard at that time was, there's not enough money in this program to do anything. When I first got into this business in the my first year in emergency management is 1982. Your local emergency management director was the dog catcher, the Veterans Affairs administrator, the dump coordinator, and oh, by the way, your fourth job is emergency management coordinator. When you have split alliances like that, you can't expect to get a focus on emergency management in this. The whole idea of that trust fund was to fund emergency management and to make it a priority business of government. That's why that trust fund was created. And that's why it's been protected fiercely through the association that some of you belong to, FEPA, from the raids that have come on it through the years. You know, because it is a $2 surcharge on all of you. All of us pay this if you own a home. And it's a $4 surcharge on all businesses. And that's been in effect since 1993. And it has helped to fund emergency management. We're the only state in the nation that has such a trust fund. There have been 5 other states that have tried it. I've literally gone to Ohio, Texas, Pennsylvania, Arkansas, and Georgia. And I actually have given presentations in front of their Senate or House committees, trying to persuade them and telling them the benefits of this program. Nobody but Florida has this. This is what this excerpt says, and it's in your book. And it's just going to further enhance the idea of the impact that Andrew had on local businesses. It says, further, virtually all economic activity in the devastation South Dade area ceased following the storm. The heaviest damage was inflicted on South Dade area homes to 8,000 and nearly 60,000 businesses in the county, and a loss of 120,000 jobs. As of September the 24th, 1992, now this is a month after, because it made landfall on August the 24th, an estimated 86,000 people were without work. 7,800 businesses were closed, and we're talking 30 days post-event. At least temporarily, tourism, a $500 million per year industry, was virtually stopped. Restaurants, hotels, parks, travel industry, severely impacted. There is uncertainty about the reopening of Homestead Air Force Base, which was severely damaged by the storm. The base accounted for 14,000 military and civilian jobs that annually contributed more than $400 million to the local economy. Approximately 80,000 military retirees shopped at the base. Damage to agriculture is estimated at $1 billion. Now, these are 1993 dollars. You can multiply this by 2 for inflation. With permanent income loss of $250 million and $580 million in damage to structures. I think I've convinced you that this is truly something that ought to get our attention. Storms, hurricanes in Florida are very, very serious things. They can do a tremendous amount of damage. You see recently all the tornadoes that have happened up north. Hurricane Andrew was basically a 20-mile wide tornado with winds in excess of 220 miles per hour. That's basically what it was around the eye wall. And that was not the only impact the state of Florida has ever had from a major hurricane. In terms of you specifically as county commissioners, what's your role in all of this? You are empowered by Chapter 252 with this responsibility, which is to appropriate and expend funds to make contracts, obtain and distribute equipment, material supplies. You can read it. Basically, your roles are very clearly laid out in Chapter 252 as a local county commissioner in a county. You have extraordinary authority under 252 to do a lot of extraordinary things. One of the ones that most people really like is the waiver of your local procurement standards or obligations. Under your local state of local emergency, you can circumvent those things to expedite the purchasing of materials that you need quickly. All right, this is just stating the obvious. Wind-related damages can cripple a county's economy and residents for extended periods of time, like no duh. Yeah, it sure can. It can really put a damper on your week. You got to realize too, and we'll see this in a few minutes. Did any of you know how long Hurricane Andrew literally was over land in Florida? Anybody want to venture a guess here in Quincy?
3 hours.
4 hours. It was a 4-hour event that caused today about, if you do it in today's dollars, about $42 billion of damages, really primarily to 2 counties. All right, now, one of the jobs I had, as I said earlier, was to work in the Bureau of Recovery and Mitigation. One of the things we did, we were the bureau that all of the FEMA disaster recovery funds passed through. The billions of dollars passed through this one little bureau of mine before it hit the counties. So we were very aware of how long it takes to recover from a disaster. Hurricane Andrew stayed open. We call them open disasters. In other words, it's a grant from FEMA through the President's Disaster Trust Fund. To close that grant, close the package, you have to have everything tightly bundled with a big yellow ribbon tied around it, and you give it to the feds. 17 years to close Hurricane Andrew. The average length of time to close a disaster is 10 years. You're still working on Ivan, I would imagine. You're probably working on Tropical Storm Faye, and you will be for a long time. Disasters take a long time to close out. So, again, painting the picture of anything we can do to help you mitigate these impacts for the benefit of your county, I'm hoping will be of great interest to you. Mitigating even a small percentage of the wind-related damages from hazards can make a huge benefit for the county. And I think I've got in your book, there is some numbers, and actually we'll come up to the numbers here in a little bit. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. All right, as commissioners and staff, you have the unique opportunity to take full advantage of these things for the benefit of your whole county. Your local residents, there are programs that they are eligible to apply for and have. But for the majority of the things that I'm talking about today, you guys, as commissioners or staff to your commissions, are in total control of, do you want this or not? Do you go for this or not? Are you aggressively pursuing it or not? And the options are really yours. It truly is in your court to take the full advantage of these kinds of opportunities. FEMA claims that for every $1 spent on mitigation, communities on average save $3 to $4 over the long run. And how do those dollars manifest themselves? Well, you think about the ripple effects that a storm will have. The slowdown of your economy, the decline in your tax base. All of these things add up to huge impacts. So if you can mitigate even a small portion of your future damages, it will have tremendous impacts for you in your county. I love this. Disasters make villains or heroes out of you. The rule of thumb is that you as a local leader is called the honeymoon period in emergency management. You have 72 hours, 3 days, to get your act together. Because at the end of the third day, historically, and I've been through 48 presidential disaster declarations in Florida, I guarantee you, starting day 3, towards the end of day 3, if you don't have your act together, if you're not out front showing people how are you going to recover, you've got your messaging, your PIO system cranked up, you're telling people how to get into the FEMA disaster recovery things. If you're not showing people where the food and water is, where the points of distribution are, if you haven't set up your county staging area, you're going to not be a hero. You're going to be a villain. And guess what happens to villains come election time? Well, I've seen this happen over and over again. Believe me. I've seen good people not get reelected because of not bad actions, but not actions that people could see demonstrably. They couldn't see or tell what it was you were doing. So you've got to get out front of these things. You've got to be the face of your community. You've got to stand up and say, here's what we're doing in Gulf County, Taylor County, Hendry County, Osceola. Here's where we are in Gadsden. This is what we're doing for you, local citizens. All right? If you don't do that, people are going to wonder, where are you? The old saying that the former director of Miami-Dade, Kate Hale, made an infamous saying that still rings true today. Where's the cavalry? And when that went out across the nation, I could stand here all for the rest of the time and tell you horror stories of the knee-jerk reaction to that comment and the unwanted stuff that showed up in Miami-Dade, Florida, because President Bush #1 got on the TV and said, send your stuff to Florida. Well, we got stuff that today is buried in a pit the size of a football field in the Palm Beach County Fairgrounds because we didn't need fur coats, winter jackets in August in Florida.
Never.
So I'm digressing and I apologize. Taken seriously, this course can provide the mechanisms to provide your leadership. It can show you how to get out front of all of this stuff. Knowledge is a wonderful thing. You start talking this talk and people will know that you know what you're talking about. And you can be in front of everyone else who's out there trying to go forward. All right, this is a natural place where we can stop and take questions. Are there any questions? And we'll start, I guess, I don't quite know how we do this question part, but are there any questions here in Quincy? Really haven't given you anything that's going to probably cause you to ask questions or comments.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In the introduction, you had said that this webinar was showing from Gainesville to 4 locations. Taylor County, Quincy, and what are the other?
I believe it's Hendry and Osceola.
Thank you.
It is, okay? All right. Well, then let's move on, and we'll go through the next section, and then we will take a physical break for facilities and uses and things like that. All right, you may not realize that, how many of you all, when you track a hurricane, you're looking at that little red line that the Weather Service puts out, and you're thinking, well, gosh, I'm 100 miles away from that. I don't have to worry. Well, you do have to worry. These are the 304 and 05 storms. These were the first 3, well, actually a combo of them. Gene, Francis, Charlie, and Ivan. There's just the swath, the middle little section of the part of the state that was not impacted by one of these storms. Just because Charlie made landfall in Punta Gorda doesn't relieve you of the angst that you should be feeling up in Orange County, because that's where it eventually went. But even at that point, the wind fields go out for miles on both sides of a hurricane. That's very, very, very important. When you look at just the bare statistics, 100% of Florida's 67 counties will have wind-related damages over the next 50 years or sooner. All right, that's not my statistic. That's the Weather Service's statistic. So statistically, on average, the entire state will experience hurricane-force winds at least once every 50 years. Coastal counties, obviously, it's way much quicker. Some counties, it's every 3 years on average. Although this course is focused on hurricane winds, you know as well as I do, you can get winds from a variety of different sources. You can have a severe thunderstorm. The winter storm of '93. Remember that? Those of you that were in Florida at the time, down around Taylor County, you guys down in Taylor County, you know what happened. That storm came across. It was snowing in Pensacola. There were gale force winds in Tallahassee. There was a storm surge in Taylor, Levy, and Dixie counties that killed 10 people. And it was 80 degrees in Miami. So you went from snow to 80 degrees, all because of this frontal system that was going through the state. The only time I did a live interview on National Public Radio was the morning of that winter storm. And the announcer said, "What is it like down there?" I said, "It's almost apocalyptic. You've got snow on one end of the county," and remember, it was the '93 event when that front moved through. I-10 froze over. All of the bridges iced up. I-10 had to be closed for ice in '93, while we were having storm surge, tornadoes, and 80-degree weather south of there. So just the nuances of where you live and what can happen. So just because you see something happen, don't think that you will be relieved of any kind of responsibility or any kind of impacts from these storms. Obviously, I've focused on hurricanes. You can see on the graphic at the bottom here your probabilities of a hurricane strike. Just find your county and look at the probabilities of when and you can expect to have your next hurricane. Pretty high here in our state. And you may be saying, well, not me, not in my term, it's the next guy's problem. Really, it's not so bad. Gosh, we haven't had an event in, how long has it been since Florida's really had a real hurricane? It's really been since the 04-05 season. But when you look at it historically, and you add it all up for the last 150 years, That's what you got. Show me one place in Florida that is not impacted. Show me a 10-mile swath of land in Florida that is not impacted. I mean, this is pretty substantial. This is historically the impact that you can have with wind in Florida. Pretty significant impact. If you think that you're never going to have to worry about it, think again. You will have to worry about it. Amazing thing, and again, you can go online and pull down this study. It was done in 2009. It was called the Hurricane Loss Mitigation Study for Commercial Risks. I believe it was another RCMP funded project. I've read this report. It's really good. It lays out, and of course, now these numbers go back our 2009 vintage. But you can see the impact to the commercial structures, the vulnerability that a major hurricane can have on this state. And this is just one of many, many graphics in that report. I encourage you to go to the floridadisaster.org and get into the mitigation shop and go down into the library and find this report, because it's quite an eye-opener. When you read this thing and see the impacts that previous hurricanes have had economically, then it will wake you up to the realities of what a large major storm can do. This is a rough estimate of the impacts that a hurricane can have. $1.3 trillion of vulnerability in our state. That's pretty significant. Well, if you had a portion of that, what impact would that have on you? I always like to put in some statistics. They talk louder than I ever will need to, because they show you the vulnerability in just pure raw numbers. You've got basically 80% of everybody who lives in the state of Florida lives within 10 miles of the coast. That's pretty significant, isn't it? Virtually 95% of all of us live within 35 miles of the coast. If you think about it, the only inland large city we've got is what? Orlando, Mickey Mouse World. Everything else is along the coast, because that's why you move to Florida. You don't move to go live in the middle of a pine tree stand. You come to the coast. You want to get close to the water. That's why you come down here. But because of that desire and because of how wonderful our state is, you virtually have the entire state's population living within 35 miles of one of the oceans, the Gulf or the Atlantic. 82 million visitors came to Florida in 2010. Guess when the majority of those people are here? During what season? Hurricane season. All right? So you've got the extra thing, especially, I can't wait to when we go south. I'm hoping we'll get some Monroe County, Florida Keys people in the audience to see the impact. Their population triples, swells from just tourists. And as of today, there are parts of US 1 that are still 2 lane. So you've got a serious problem in the state of Florida. All right, historical impacts. We'll go through this and talk about these 3 hurricanes, and then we'll take a break. And I wanted to dwell on these events because it's so easy to say, not on my watch. It's so easy to say, well, it's been, gosh, you're talking about Hurricane Andrew. That was 1992. Well, how many of these monsters do you have to have every so 20 years and still have the impacts of them? So you always have to be prepared for them. After they re-estimated the wind fields of Hurricane Andrew, they determined that it was at point of landfall a Category 5 storm. The only other Category 5 hurricane we've had in the state was the 1934 Labor Day storm that killed the 400 people as it came across Isla Morada and literally wiped those islands clean and turned the Flagler Railroad upside down. Quite a story. There's also been other events. In 1928, a Category 4 hurricane made landfall in Palm Beach County. At that time, there were a lot of, for lack of a better word, indentured farmers that were working around Lake Okeechobee. A lot of people don't realize that there were hundreds of people that drowned near and around Lake Okeechobee when the storm surge from the lake drowned the people in Palm Beach, around Belglade and Immokalee, and that area there. So these things can have tremendous, tremendous impacts. It made landfall in Miami-Dade, and really the two counties of greatest impact are Dade and Broward. If you look at Monroe, where it exits, at that point over there in Monroe County, there's not a whole lot of growth. Most of Monroe County is in the Keys. This is all pretty much the Everglades and what have you. There's not a whole lot of people that live there. So really, you're looking at the two biggest impacted counties were Miami-Dade and Broward. So most of these numbers are truly, it was a 4-county impact. But really, when you really boil down and you look at the numbers, it was a 2-county impact. As we said earlier, it was a 4-hour event. Well, what can happen in 4 hours? A whole lot can happen in 4 hours. After that event, South Dade, really not South Dade, all of Miami-Dade was crippling for months. We set up the Emergency Operations Center, was moved from Tallahassee down to the eastern hangar at the northeast corner of the Miami airport. It was a 4-story facility, and at that time I was the operations chief. And Governor Childs was the governor at the time. Tom Herndon was the chief of staff. The entire cabinet, Carol Browner, who later became the DEP secretary, was the DEP secretary here in Florida. All of them were there. We were all there in a room not much bigger than this for almost a year with an active EOC, trying to get our hands around this mess that Mother Nature had caused. When you first went out and you looked at this event, the first thing that I felt was, where do you start? Where do you even start with this? Well, you started block by block, function by function. This is why some of these plans I'm going to talk to you about a little later are so important. Because if you don't know what you're doing, especially as leadership, out front people, you're going to be filleted and fried. You've got to know this process. You've got to know how you turn on the federal dollars. You know, most of you veterans know that, and one of our commissioners here in the audience today just got back from Washington, having spent some time with FEMA, arguing with them, I bet you, over some disaster project worksheet that they may have denied and Gulf County feels like they're eligible for. I mean, these are wars. These are things that if you don't know how this works, you're going to be so left out to dry that, and you can't totally rely 100% on your emergency management folks. In most of your counties, it is a 1, 2, at the most 3-man shop or a woman shop. So you guys need to know all of this too. Andrew was basically a wind event. Those are the statistics of what Andrew did. I remember when I first showed this to some folks, to me this is so just review, but I have to stop and realize how many people are left today in this profession that went through Andrew. If you go over and you roam the halls of the Florida Division of Emergency Management nowadays, I bet you can count on one hand the number of people that were there when Andrew hit. So all of that historical knowledge of all the stuff we had to do on the fly, most of it, is gone. And there hasn't been a Category 5 event since in the largest, most vulnerable community in the state. So this is just what it did to those counties down there. And as you can see, you can read, it was significant. As I said earlier, yes, you had a lot of coastal flooding and there was inland flooding, but it basically was a wind event. if you could have mitigated even a portion of this impact, if through some of these programs we're going to talk about here in the next segment, if you could have prevented 5%, 10% of these damages, what impact would that have had? In your notebook, I put a little statistic in there. For Andrew alone, just a 5% reduction because of mitigation, just a 5% reduction would have generated $200 million saved. A 10% reduction would have saved $400 million. A 20% reduction would have saved almost $1 billion of damages. So, why not take advantage of these programs that can help make you a stronger, more viable county and resistant to wind? I just threw Ivan in there just to show you that it's not just a South Florida thing, it's also a panhandle thing. Ivan impacted Escambia County primarily, but the impacts were felt as far over as here in Tallahassee. And it was still a $14 billion event. 14 deaths, 140,000 people with destroyed homes. The thing about Ivan that really impressed me, this was the first time we really kicked in what was called the Blue Roof program, the tarps. And when you flew over, basically, when we would fly from, Panama City over to Escambia and Perdido Key, all you saw was a sea of blue from the air because of the Blue Tarp program. The idea there being, if your home is still livable but impacted, to keep it livable, we can give you a blue tarp, and it keeps you in your home, and you're not a burden on government. You're not a burden on the shelters. We're not feeding you 3 times a day. We're keeping you home in your own home, and you can initiate your repairs while you live there if you have this blue tarp on. They're not cheap. Every average house costs about $3,000 by the time you bought the tarp, and if we sent the contractor out to do it for you, it was about $3,000 a pop. Our preference was to give you the tarp, and you go do it. Then it was virtually, a couple of $100, as opposed to us having to bring in a contractor to do it for you. So you can see the impacts even from Ivan, and it really was a 2-county impact. Wilma, one of the most devastating hurricanes of history. It was the 3rd most expensive hurricane in the history of hurricanes since they recorded damage assessment figures. A lot of people don't realize that. Wilma, if you'll recall, where did Wilma make landfall at? Over there in Naples, and it exited over on the East Coast, around Palm Beach. It's in Palm Beach County. And while it was in there, it tree trimmed, Mother Nature tree trimmed every tree that she had ever grown for the past 50 years down there. Because the wind was a different direction than what Andrew produced. It was the opposite way. So the impact of Andrew and the tree trimming that occurred there, now Mother Nature sent a hurricane in from the other way and reversed the wind field so that if your tree was compromised, it fell down. And the most significant glaring number of Wilma was the number of people who lost power. 6 million people lost power. It was one of the most dramatic impacts on the power grid that anybody has ever experienced anywhere. That's little old Wilma. A lot of people don't realize just how huge Wilma was. In Florida, there were 6 deaths. When you break down hurricanes or any other disaster, there are only 3 things that you as commissioners and staff have to worry about. One is, you're going to, regardless of what the event is, when the World Trade Centers fell down by the terrorist attack, would it have had the same impact if a hurricane knocked it down or a tornado knocked it down? The cause of the event doesn't make any difference, does it? It's the impacts, regardless of the cause, are the same. We call that consequence management. The consequences of the event are what you have to deal with. Who cares what the event is? It may be a tornado, maybe a drought, maybe a terrorist attack. What caused it doesn't really matter. The consequences are what we've got to focus on, consequence management. Tent City in South Dade, you had 180,000 people instantly in 4 hours made homeless. Now, none of you are from these large counties, and I know I keep harping on this, but you have people in your county that could be instantly made homeless. What do you do with them? What's the expectation that they've got on you? The only way that we could figure out how to house that many people that quick was to set up a tent city. And I spent a lot of time here, and when you went inside of one of these tents, which are dark, drab, green, olive, those of you who've been in the military, you've been in one of these things in August? No air conditioning? And because they were so concentrated, very little breeze, this was a miserable place to be, but it was the only thing available. There was no HUD housing left standing. There were no places where we could move people because to the north in Broward, they had their own set of problems. So we had to temporarily create on the fly a place to house 180,000 people from a 4-hour event. The consequences are, no matter what the event is, it will disrupt your economy. That's the first consequence. Second one is it's going to mess up your infrastructure, regardless of the cause. And the third thing is it's going to impact your people in one way or the other. So those three consequences are going to be there regardless of the event. Again, what if you can reduce the impact to your economy, people, or infrastructure? That's what this course is all about. They can cause short and long-term recovery issues that can cripple your county for many months. All I can say is yes, absolutely. I'm standing here as a witness to it. After 20, 30 years in this profession, I've seen it happen. And in the last 6 years since I've left the division, I've seen it happen because I've been in many other states. Immediately after I left the division, I worked at a company called Wind Mitigation. One of the first jobs I had there is President Bush II had ordered an evaluation of every state's emergency management plans. So the 2 states, we had a team of about 25, and myself and the former director of Georgia, a guy by the name of Mike Scherberger, the 2 of us were a team, and we had the states of Texas and Louisiana, Katrina and Rita, and Ike. So we got an eye-opening experience. When you start going to some of these, especially in Texas, when you started seeing as far inland as San Antonio and Austin, the impacts that those storms had, Rita and Ike, it was quite interesting to see. All right, you're here to learn how to minimize these negative consequences through wind mitigation. Okay, I know I keep saying that, but all right, this is the place where we need to go ahead and take our first break. When we come back from the break, we'll ask opportunities for questions.
That's fine.
Okay? So if you've got questions, let's go ahead. It is 10 o'clock now. We'll take a 10-minute break. So at 10:10, we will start back again, and we'll initiate our start back with an opportunity for you to ask any questions up to this point. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get.
They got a door railed off, huh?
Yeah. They have to have handicap access, and so that's the handicap access back there.
I don't see us up on there, is it?
No, that's what they were selling. Quincy tells me they've lost this, but I know we're there because we can see their picture.
We can see them.
Yeah.
They just can't see us.
Right, so that's why.
Rod, we can see you on our screen now.
I
Oh,
I can't hear you, but I can see you.
Release the
No.
button, Rod.
can you hear me now?
Okay. I can now.
Okay. So, Glenn, did we just get hooked back up, or is it the way they had their screen set up that they weren't seeing us?
It was the way the screen was
could-
configured.
The way that our screen was configured?
You were seeing a total of 4 sites, correct?
But the fourth one was us, not you all.
Right. There's a total of 5 sites, so we were dropped off as the 5th site. We weren't
Right.
we weren't
But now we
disconnected. You
see
just
you.
weren't
It's-
seeing us.
Okay, well, we weren't hearing you either. I mean, we are now, but we weren't earlier.
Okay, it should be set because I got up and tried to see if he wanted to get any questions from Taylor, and I could tell he wasn't hearing. So their screen is set up as 4 sites, and so probably the last place that's not talking is going to drop off if it's set up as a 4-site screen. Glenn?
We have ours set up now with, I mean, we have all 4 sites, and then we have the display in the display window that shows our site.
Okay.
But for the last hour, you were not being seen, and we had the display and display showing our site, and our site was large and live,
Okay.
and we could not hear you. But now it seems to be fixed.
Okay, and there's sometimes the packet loss is pretty significant between Quincy and Gainesville today, and the only thing I could think about that is with the legislative session going on and so many people around Tallahassee, we're getting some really clear pictures, but we're getting some with packet loss as well. So, anyway, well,
Okay.
if it screws up again, just call and we'll see. But it may be the way they've got the screen set up there. But if we started off and you saw us, so when Fred first started talking, you saw him and you saw all the other 4 sites both. Or have you only
No.
seen? Okay, then it sounds like
We have
it's-
not seen you all since we started talking. When you turned it over to me and I was at the podium, I haven't seen Alachua since then.
Okay, I have a feeling it's the way the screen's set up in Quincy, but when we get ready to start, I'll jump up and try to talk, and we'll make sure we got that corrected then.
Okay, well, we're going to do questions when we come back at 10:10.
Okay, so I'll try to jump
Okay.
in right then. Okay, thanks, Latrell.
Okay. Uh-huh. Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
We are going to get started. Would you like to do the roll call for questions?
Sure. Okay, everyone, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get back started with the session. And we were going to start out with questions. And I'm going to go to Taylor County first. And I guess you didn't hear me when they took the first question period because I was pushing the wrong button and was muting myself. But are there any questions in Taylor County on what's been discussed so far? So is Fred...
Any questions? Is that all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rod, I don't think we have any questions right now.
Okay. And what about in Hendry County? Are there any questions from individuals back down in Hendry County?
No, not at this time.
Okay. So let's go back to Quincy. Are there questions in Quincy?
No questions here, Rod.
Okay. Now, one of the things, if you guys don't ask questions, I get to ask one. So the thing I found interesting in the first part, and I'll go back to the 2004 and 2005 experience. Frank has done a very good job talking to you about the long-term cost in the community. But there was there's also long-term opportunities in the community as it goes to planning and zoning and rebuilding. And if we all remember back to 2004, 2005 experience, plywood prices shot up, the Florida economy took off like crazy, and that's when we all thought we were in hog heaven because we had more money than we knew what to do with. So while I think it's important to note all the negative sides, I guess, Frank, the negative sides are on what it does to property value, how long it takes to recover and stuff like that. But I guess we would acknowledge that in some of these storms, there's a great opportunity to redesign the community, maybe, and also that we found out that businesses have been able to seek some economic rents. So if you want to take just a minute and address that, I'd appreciate it, and then we can go on with your presentation.
Absolutely. For example, that's a great concept. Right after Hurricane Andrew, the difference in the prior 3 years of sales tax averages was looked at. They applied it to the sales tax that was generated as a result of Hurricane Andrew, and it generated an excess of $600 million. What they did, what Governor Childs and leadership did with that money, one of the functions that they did was to create bridge loans. Later, the concept was picked up and used several times after this event, but this was the first time that the state initiated a bridge loan or a gap loan. It takes a while for the Small Business Administration to get up and running. It takes a while for businesses to pull the data together that they need in order to even request those funds. So the concept was, you can't wait. So why don't we use this excess sales tax blip, one-time blip, and do something productive to help the local economies? And what they did, and again, like I said, they've used it several times since, was to create this bridge loan program. And it was a very successful program because normally, often you give these kinds of loans out and your return rate is not so good. The last time I actually looked at this, which was in the 90s, of that $500 million they loaned out, they virtually got 90% of it back. So incredibly successful. There's an old adage, wars and major disasters can be tremendous economic boosts too. If you don't happen to be an impacted county, but a county close to an impacted county, you can have quite the economic boost because of all of the people. You think about how many people the local hotels had to house. Just Florida Power and Light alone brought in thousands and thousands of people all the way from Vermont through their mutual aid agreements. Duke Power was hugely present in the state of Florida. These people all got to stay somewhere. They all got to rely on the local economy while the recovery process is going on. So I couldn't agree more with the statement that, yes, I have painted the bleak side of the picture my main goal in doing that was to get you to see if you had the opportunity to reduce your vulnerability, would you be interested in doing it? And in order to get that interest up, I painted this bleak picture of what these things can do to you. But, Rod, you make a tremendous point. They're also quite the economic boost to some communities, especially the non-impacted ones. Does that get at what you were asking?
It sure does, and I wasn't complaining. I just thought it would be a good time to interject in there that that some communities had the other problems: space available for people who need to stay, restaurants couldn't serve enough people, there wasn't supplies around to rebuild the houses and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. There's pluses and minuses on all of these events. All right, let's get into the meat of some of these opportunities. First, what is wind mitigation? Wind mitigation is any activity you or your citizens can take to reduce your vulnerability to the impacts of wind. And that could be through any variety of things, through planning. This is Washington County's local mitigation strategy, window frame enhancements, and the things that I put up here are the things that I know the state has funded through the wind mitigation efforts. Hurricane clips, strengthening mobile home tie-downs, obviously the Florida Building Code, the 2010 edition. I'm a firm believer that building codes are the most important mitigation tool any state can have, because universally, for every construction, you are going to apply a regulatory standard that has been designed to take care of some of these issues that I've been talking about. So building codes, going Code Plus on your roof, these are things that these programs can fund, okay? So wind mitigation is any activity that you take to mitigate the impacts of wind. In your handbook are all of these examples. It's almost impossible for you to read this where you are. But these are examples of things, and these all come offline on the Florida Division of Emergency Management website. If you click down far enough, there's examples of what projects this type of funding has funded, the kinds of activities that it can get into. And they're pretty interesting stuff. Roof structures that, and there are caveats to every one of these things. Not everything is eligible. It has to fit certain criteria. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm not going to get too deep in today. Suffice it to say, these are the kinds of things that have been funded. These are examples of things that have been funded. So these are activities that are real. All right, this section is going to look at these three major headings. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at are local plans. What do you have now on the books, literally, in your counties that can help you understand mitigation? And can you do anything about embellishing? If you so wanted to, could you make more effort to mitigate your wind impacts? Yes, you can. Then we will look at, and at the end of this planning section, we'll stop and ask questions. Then we'll go into the next one, which are the actual programs with money. And I would imagine we may have to stop after each one of these individual programs if you're going to have questions on those. And then we'll look at what is the CCCL line, and then just briefly touch on the Florida Building Code, the 2010 revisions. In your handout, in your pre-read materials, you have this at a glance. If I were you, I would try to put myself in your shoes. Most of you don't have the luxury of time to tote around this book or this slide presentation, but you can carry this and keep this available. This is at a glance, everything that I'm talking to you about on 2 pages. I kind of like that. I like things condensed down to a sentence or two, just as a tickler or a reminder me of what this thing is. So if you have not pulled that off the website and downloaded it, this would be, if this is all you kept, keep this. Because this gives you the bare basics of everything that we're about to talk about. So very, very important for you to have this. These are all the programs, what they are, what the requirements are, how do you implement them, where's the money, and what are the impacts. It's very, very nice. Okay? Each of the opportunities, we've already talked about these things already. Remember, I said that every one of these things are going to be broken out into these 4 categories. So as we go through these slides and as you look at your examples in your handout headers are these. So every one of these programs will be discussed in terms of these 4 questions right here. Okay, your county plans. What do you have locally now that you can influence or at least just be aware of that exists? The most important one, the one that activates a lot of this, is your local mitigation strategy. Especially you county commissioners, pay special attention. If there is no other plan your emergency management shop does, and if you skim through everything and you sign off and adopt and yada yada yada, things that you're used to doing, this one here you really ought to read, because this is the one that is going to house everything I'm talking about here at your level. If this plan is not approved on a 5-year cycle, you are not eligible for any of this. Now, to give you a little history about LMSs. Back in the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, this is a result of what's called the DM2K, Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000. We had a very good proponent in the House, U.S. Congress House. Her name was Tilly Fowler. And the lady that was her main aide was a lady by the name of Stephanie Kopeloussis, who later became the DOT secretary here in Florida. We approached both of them with this concept of creating these local strategies. Florida was the leader in the development of an LMS. Today, every 3,500 counties across this nation have to develop these things based on what Florida did, and Tilly Fowler and Stephanie Kopeloussis and Florida Division of Emergency Management. That's the impact that Florida DEM had on today a national effort. We helped craft the language in the Federal Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 because the main sponsor in the House was Tilly Fowler. So a lot of what the rest of the nation is doing, Florida had already been doing. And it had been doing it through these local mitigation strategies. These strategies identify, one, all of this vulnerability stuff specific to you, not to the whole state of Florida, but to Gulf County, to Hendry County, to Osceola, to Alachua, to Gadsden. Every one of you counties have one of these things, and your analysis and your vulnerability is tailored to your county in your LMS. So you can see what I showed you on a statewide impact. You can read this thing and see what the impact would be at the county level. Again, what the LMS does is it requires that you pre-identify mitigation projects that you can fund to reduce your vulnerability to all hazards, but obviously you can use it for wind mitigation. Later on, hopefully, when we tailor this course to flood, we'll be saying the same thing, but we'll say to flood mitigation, because it's tailored to all forms of mitigation. But for today, for our purposes today, you can tailor and pre-identify projects in your LMS that would help you with wind mitigation. What you do is your local mitigation committee, every one of you counties have an LMS committee, some sorts, in variety of activation levels. Taylor County, you guys down there are very active. You have a very good local LMS committee. Dustin down there does an excellent job in keeping this group active, because Taylor County realizes how important this kind of effort is, because they're sticking right in the elbow of the state. And of every county in the state of Florida, Taylor County will have the highest storm surges in the state of Florida, in the United States, in the world. Taylor County will experience the highest storm surges of any landmass on the globe. 28 to 32 feet of storm surge. Those guys down in Taylor know this. The rest of you folks may not have realized that they live in infamy. And that's a statistic I'm sure you commissioners down there wish you didn't have. But you've got tremendous impacts that storm surge could have down there, and wind, obviously. So your LMS is simply a place where you can document your vulnerability, document your plan of action to reduce your vulnerability, and a scope of work that gets you there. What obviously you're waiting on is either the funding through a variety of sources, and I'm going to show you those sources later on. But the prime one you're going to use is a program called the Hazard Mitigation Program, HMGP, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And we'll spend a lot of time talking to you about that. So, that is your first plan. The process of how this works is the LMS is approved by DEM, and then they go on to FEMA, and FEMA has to sign off on these things. At the point that FEMA signs off on your LMS, that is the physical point that you are then eligible for future funding. If you get out of cycle, you fall behind, and you have an event, you're out of luck. So don't blow this plan off. This one is important in terms of mitigation and your ability to tap in to some of these funding sources. Not everything is prohibited if you don't have an approved LMS, but for the most part, the programs that have the most money, you would not be able to take any kind of action to. The benefits for your county, the LMS is next to your building code enforcement, I think is the most important plan that you've got in terms of mitigation. It truly does lay out the blueprint for how all of your counties are approaching mitigation. That's very, very critical for you, and something that I hope that you have spent some time and been engaged in. The next plan is one that you all should be very aware of. These comprehensive emergency management plans, in some iteration or another, have been around since the Civil Defense Act was passed in 1950. So since the mid-50s, literally, everybody has had to have something that suffices for what we call today the CEMP. Used to be in the old days called your EOP, Emergency Operations Plan, but here the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan is your plan of actions to respond to these events, to prepare for them, to recover from them, and most importantly, to mitigate their impacts. So, although your LMS and in the future, as I understand how DEM is moving toward, if you have an approved LMS, it will suffice for the mitigation section of your CEMP, so you won't have duplicate efforts at your local level. But for today, both of these plans touch on mitigation. Your CEMP and all of their annexes, all 17 annexes, have a mitigation component in them. How are you going to impact or mitigate your ability to do something with ESF1, transportation, or utilities, or communications, 3, public works, 4, firefighting? All of these things that your county is broken out to functionally, every one of those annexes have a mitigation component associated with them that helps think through how you're going to mitigate some of these impacts. So right now, the two really important plans for you are your LMS and your CEMP. All right, the funding, of course there's no funding associated. You can use some of the state funds that the state gives the emergency management program one of the eligible activities there is to update and keep updated and to exercise your CEMP. So in terms of actual cash money to go do something out in the field, no. But to keep the plan updated, yes. There are state funds that come to every county through a generated annual scope of work that allows this activity, which is to keep the CEMP updated. The benefit to your county is it's a one-stop shop. It is the plan that shows you how you're preparing for these events, how you would respond to them when they happen, how you would recover from them, and gives you the outline, and most of these plans point you toward how you are going to mitigate these things and point you toward your LMS. So, you've got, every county has one of these plans. All right, your comprehensive plans, your comp plans. Of course, the legislature drastically revised the comp plan requirements in terms of them being submitted to what was the DCA, Department of Community Affairs. A lot of that, all of that, much of that has changed, but all counties still have some iteration of their comp plans. And those that are coastal counties have coastal elements. Element 13 is the coastal element. And within that element, there are lots of initiatives, lots of things that can be put in there to help with wind mitigation. And you're in control of that. You're in control of your local comp plan. A lot of people will try to make it easier for development to go into the coastal area, but this attempt is to get you to realize, yes, that's obviously where your tax base is, and the higher tax base is always going to be on coastal development. But through your comp plan, you can create an atmosphere of wise development, prudent development in your coastal area, so that you don't have to go through all of these impacts that I've showed you earlier. You can impose a little higher standard out there in your coastal area, if you so chose. You can go beyond the building code, the Florida building code, if you choose. The way it's implemented, obviously you guys implement it through your, whatever you call your zoning board, your planning department, whatever it is that does your code enforcement at your level. You're in control of this. So again, it's another plan, another place where you can impact mitigation, wind mitigation to some degree, if you're really going to get into this. And I would encourage all of you, especially you commissioners, empower somebody at your level to take this material. Somebody at the local level needs to really understand all this stuff. You don't have time to just focus in on this, I realize that, but your staff does. Somebody in your county should be fully apprised of everything that I'm talking about today, so that they can advise you when that time comes of what to do. All right, the next thing we're going to look at, this is something new. It's a voluntary plan at this point. I believe it's voluntary, right? It's still voluntary.
Technically, coastal county leaders.
Technically, coastal counties should do this, and that's the part of the coastal element, because in that coastal element language, there is a requirement that every coastal community develop some type of post-disaster redevelopment plan. All right? FEMA kind of grabbed onto this idea and thought about it a while and funded the state to go out and do some pilot projects. Those plans, I believe 5 of those plans are online right now, correct?
I'm not sure about the number, but...
Okay. I physically looked at Nassau, I believe it's Polk, and somewhere in the Tampa Bay region. But these plans, there are some examples of these plans online. So it is at this point, a voluntary plan. It suffices for your requirements in your coastal element as your redevelopment plan, which is the requirement that's on the books right there. What I have found in reading and studying about this, the cool thing about what these plans do, immediately after a disaster, what is on everybody's heart? To help and get everything back to normal as quickly as possible. What if it's your desire to put it back better. This plan lays that blueprint out during blue skies on a day like today, so that when the gray skies impact you, you don't have to worry about the implications of sounding cold-hearted or hard-hearted, because you can put all this stuff in this plan when you're not under the threat of a disaster or a disaster recovery. I saw this very clearly happen after Hurricane Hugo. The state sent me up to the state of South Carolina, and I went to a community up there called Mount Pleasant and spent a little time up there. It was on the landward side of Sullivan's Island, which is completely isolated because the bridge was sticking. It was one of these bridges that went like this, and it was literally up like this. The day that we got there, they had to do a ferry. But what happened in Mount Pleasant is everybody wanted to get in and make makeshift repairs. Makeshift, just get it back quickly as we can. You know, and all of the local people there realized, no, we're in this mess because we allowed this to happen. So they put a building moratorium. How popular you suppose they were to impose a building moratorium right after a disaster? Not very. But they felt the need to do that in order to get their hands around building it back better, building it back to at least current code, and not allowing just anybody to come in and repair it any way they could. So they imposed, one of the first times that I've ever seen it happen, they brought in codes people, permit people from all the surrounding communities, and they set up a one-shop place where you had to come in and pull your permits, and the permits required that you build it back to at least current code, if not code plus. First time I've ever seen that happen, but I saw what they went through trying to get there. They were filleted in the press. Why won't you let us do this? Blah, blah, blah. This plan allows all of that discussion to go away. You can put all of that kind of forethought into how you want to rebuild ahead of time in this document, and then when the time and the disaster hits, you can lay this on the table and say, I am bound by law to do it this way. Takes all of the heat off of you as a commissioner. So that's what I have found to be the benefit of this plan. It takes a tremendous amount of heat off of you if you do it right. And the ones that are online, the ones that I've looked at, did it right. They did a beautiful job of doing that. These plans can be standalone plans. They can be adopted as a part of your local comp plan. Some people have adopted them as an annex to their CEMP. When you as the board adopt them, then they carry the weight of law. And that's the beauty of these things. And that's if you're so wanting to do this. I have been in too many places and been on the other end of too many commissioners during the 04 and 05 storms where I literally had to hold the phone out like this because I was being screamed at because there was some, they called it FEMA regulation that was preventing this or that from happening. Well, guys, those regulations are put in place to prevent the next storm from happening. So, although I understood the need for speed and the desire to represent the hurting people of the local community, there was also the other side. You're here in this mess because of the willy-nilly enforcement and all of the other stuff that has been allowed, maybe not on your watch, but on somebody else's watch. And now you're stuck with the consequences of it. So, if you're so inclined, like I said, it's a voluntary effort, take a look at this. Just look at what this can do for you. I found it to be most interesting. And maybe one day it will be, I'm not going to say it should be a requirement or not. I just think it's a very solid tool in the arsenal of a county commissioner to at least take advantage or take a look at it. Have somebody in your county take a look at it if you don't have one of these. There's a contact most of you have printed these slides out, so you've got that contact information if you're interested in this and learning more about it. Very nice, on the DEM website in the mitigation section, there's a nice little write-up. In fact, almost everything you're seeing today, I just borrowed from the website to make sure that I was consistent. That if you ever went there, you would be reading what it is you're seeing here. As with all websites, you've got to realize that keeping them up to date and all that kind of stuff is effort and work. But for the most part, 90%, 95% of this stuff is right on. So there's today's contact for that kind of information. The benefit for your county, more efficient recovery process, build it back better, takes the heat off of you. So that I can see a lot of benefits into this kind of planning effort. All right, before we go farther, let's take a stop here and go around and see if there's any questions about any of these plans from anybody.
So let's go ahead and start with Quincy this time. Any questions up in Quincy?
Questions?
No questions from Quincy.
Okay, so let's go to Hendry County next.
No questions from Hendry.
Okay, what about in Taylor County?
Go ahead and ask questions.
No questions.
Okay, Commissioner Zalek, you got any questions? No questions here in
Oh, I
Gainesville.
take it back.
Okay.
Rod, I take it back. We do have a question.
Okay, is that Jack Brown?
That's Jack Brown. Hey, Mel.
I have a question on the wind mitigation opportunities. I see that safe rooms was listed. Is that safe rooms for public or private facilities?
It's for private facilities, correct? Yes. Yeah, private.
What would be the funding source? Our CMP funds?
Yeah, you possibly could. We're going to get into that here in a minute, and I'll show you the actual program that is associated with the safe rooms.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Frank, I just got one more on this last section you were talking about. And I know you hesitated a little bit, but when it talks about bringing the community where the damage has occurred up to the current codes and on towards the future, obviously you have a lot of professional experience. I guess I'd be interested, would it be your recommendation, since there are a few commissioners in this, that be seriously considered by counties in Florida?
Oh, absolutely. It's pay me now or pay me later. You have to go in and what is your philosophy as a commissioner? Is it truly for the protection of your people and your infrastructure? I understand a holistic, kind of a global view. The problem is every commissioner at the time of a disaster, because they are the mouthpiece of the county representing those that are hurting, feel that hurt. And they want to take away that pain as quickly as possible. That is a delicate balance between trying to keep your constituency satisfied and getting them whole again as quick as possible versus the more parental view, which is for the long run, so that you don't have to go through this the next time. Let's put it back the way it should have been built, which is up to current code, and not allow waivers or variances or any other provision that would allow it to be put back kind of in a less than up to code way. Does that answer your question?
It sure does. I think it's really important because the long run impact, when you look longer, like you talk about, is one where that not if the next event occurs, but when the next event occurs, it also probably mitigates the extensive damage that might have occurred if they let them go back with the old standards.
Correct.
Okay.
Rod?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
This is Eric, and I'm in the room here with Frank. I just had a kind of a question on this post-disaster redevelopment plan. Isn't there a sort of a communication piece that ought to be sort of attached to this? Because the county commission or city council can make the decision to go through this process of having a post-disaster redevelopment plan. So they've spent all the time, taken all that hard work to make those tough decisions in advance. Nothing happens for 3 or 4 or 5 years. Then it happens. You've got issues dealing with, a 50% rule. You've got all types of additional burdens that are going to be on somebody, whether if they're on a barrier island and they can't re-enter for 3 or 4 days, and once they're there, they have all types of limitations. So you've got this document, but unless there's sort of an ongoing communication with the residents that it's going to affect, they're still going to get filleted. So wouldn't you agree that if they're going to take this sort of action, they got to have sort of an ongoing communication piece? And certainly counties, at least coastal counties, typically advertise, during a couple months before hurricane season, these are the shelters, here's your hurricane map, this is, these are the evacuation routes. I think wouldn't it be incumbent upon them to also, if they have a post-disaster redevelopment plan, to say, by the way, should we be impacted and we have a lot of damage, these are the rules that you need to know in advance. So.
Absolutely. And not only that, as commissioners come and go, as you get a newly elected commissioner, and this plan was approved and adopted by your former predecessor, and you're not aware of it, and then the event happens, you may not be in agreement with what your former commissioner agreed to. And all of a sudden, you're as surprised as everybody else is. So, a lot of caveats with this post-disaster redevelopment plan. I couldn't agree more. It needs to be well communicated that in the event we have an event, this is what will happen. And how do you do that? You do that through however you promote and propagate your local emergency management efforts. This ought to be something that's added to the information that goes out on an annual basis. Yeah. And it needs to be, every time that there is an election, there needs to be a review of this to make sure that the current board is in total agreement with this document. Because the last thing you want is mixed messages at the time of an event. You need to be, if ever, you could, unlike our U.S. Congress today, if ever there was a time when you needed to pull together and be unified, it's post-disaster. And if you go out there and Commissioner so-and-so says, well, I don't agree with that, and that was done by the former guy, yada yada, then that just causes consternation. So, two-pronged approach. One, let the public know, and two, newly elected commissioners need to review this thing, and this should be reviewed after every election cycle to make sure that everybody's up to speed on it.
Okay, one last
say one other thing.
One last chance for questions.
Hold on, we've got one more comment here from Laura Herbert, who is with the Florida Division of Emergency Management.
With the PDRP plans, there is no one way to do them, and some counties in Florida have attached them to their local mitigation strategy plans, which in Florida have to be submitted. An annual update has to be submitted to the state in January, and it's supposed to go through the Board of County Commissioner chair as well. So they should be, if you do take that approach, the Board of County Commissioners should be made aware of, that plan on an annual basis.
Right. So. Yeah, that is something that I was remiss in mentioning is the progress you make on your LMS projects have to be submitted annually to the Division of Emergency Management. So, like Laura said, on an annual basis, there's opportunity to get up to speed on where are we with our local mitigation projects, and this would be an excellent opportunity to review that. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, let's get into the money. Let's talk about money and programs that got some money. The most important one that you will deal with is the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. As we call it, HMGP, is a program that is generated after a presidential disaster declaration. I've dealt with many declarations and many opportunities to spend or help you guys spend your HMGP allocations. The program basically can do a tremendous amount of things. It is the main source of funding that would allow you to enact the projects that you have identified in your LMS. The most perfect use of this money is to fund your LMS pre-identified projects. Now, your LMS can be adopted through a local process, so that, let's say you had a fire event and you didn't have fire-related projects on your list, you could still add, through the LMS process, you could add that project in, so it would still be eligible. But a lot of forethought ought to go into pre-identification of these programs, because if you've got it ready to go and you get this pot of money, man, boom, you're off and running. And you don't have to sit around and figure out how we're going to spend this money. All right? It's a function of a presidential disaster declaration. The state has set up a 3-tiered process for the distribution of these funds. The first tier deals with the declared counties who want to take their allocation of funding to fund their LMS projects. The second tier is still working with declared counties. Let's say Calhoun County can't use all the allocation, but Gulf County could use some more money. So that second tier allows that funding to shift to Gulf County. The third tier is statewide. Even non-declared counties could use and be made eligible for this HMGP funding if there's money left over after Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties are funded. And that, Laura, does that happen very often?
It depends on the size of the disaster.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. And we're going to look at the actual dollars that the 04-05 storms generated. And if you've read ahead, you've seen those dollars already. But I tell you, in Katrina, there was not millions, billions of dollars in this program to spend. With a B. I mean, serious, serious money that this program generates. So it behooves you to, of all the programs I talk about, walk away with understanding your LMS and understand this program, because this is a big one. All right? The reason I put up there Section 404, there's 2 different types of mitigation. We're going to look at Section 406 next, but for right now, this is the formal mainstay of your mitigation funding apparatus, and that's the HMGP. It can do a variety of things, and here's some examples: window cladding, shuttering, Code Plus on roofs. It can do some great things. It can't build something from scratch. That's not what it's there for. It's there to mitigate something that's been damaged. That's what the 404 is. 404 can be used more globally for more global things. 406 is very specific to that damaged structure. How are you going to mitigate it into the future? This allows a little bit more global approach to it, but suffice it to say, it's a very nice program. How it works is the county receives basically what's called a lock-in figure. After X number of months, sometimes it's 3, 6, a year down the road, you add up all of the money that has been spent in the public assistance program, and all the money spent in the individual assistance program, and all the money spent through the SBA, Small Business Administration, and you multiply that number, whatever that cost is, in our state by 20%. In other states it's only 15%, but because Florida has an enhanced mitigation, the state did the homework, put forth the effort, and has an approved enhanced mitigation plan. The state of Florida is eligible for 20%. So you add up the millions and millions, sometimes billions, times 20%, that's a piece of pocket change. That's a lot of money. And the distribution, there's no hard, fast way. The way it normally is done is you take your portion, if you break that down to your county level, you add up those same 3 numbers, and whatever that ends up being, times 20%, normally that's what you are eligible for. But the state is not locked into that formula, but that's the formula that they pretty much use. That way it builds consistency and there's no wrangling and arguing. about why did you get more than I did? Well, because you had more damages than you did. So that's how the program works. All right, now, the only drawback to the program is that for years, while I was there, the legislature didn't fully understand this program. And when we went to them for cash match, they thought that this was just another one of these repair programs, and they signed off on it for years. So it used to be that all your HMGP was matched by 12.5%. We went through a budget crunch very similar to the one we've got now about 7 or 8 years ago. And some very wise people found out that this is mitigation programs, this is not repair programs. So what they did was the legislature forbid us to match this program. So although it could generate a lot of money, if you decide to take advantage of it, the 25% non-federal cash match is a requirement that is placed on you as the applicant. So the state of Florida does not kick in any dollars into this program. We used to, but we don't now. So if you want to use this, you can. Now you can do in-kind match. There's all kinds of ways to come up with match other than money, hard cash money. So don't be daunted by the fact that you've got to match this thing. You can do a lot of stuff in-house, in-county, that can suffice for match. So it doesn't always mean dollar bills. It can mean other types of match. But that is it's still, when you look at the benefits to the county, it's still 75% of the cost of a project is coming to you free. 75% of your mitigation project comes at you on the back of FEMA, the federal government. So it's still a very good program. And this is why you have this tier 1, 2, and 3 setup. Because unfortunately, some counties that have been impacted don't have that 25% and don't have a way to figure out how to come up with the 25%. So that's why, like Eric said, a lot of times large pots of money sit around unused. And most of the time it's a function of unable to match the cash. But at least you know that this program is out there, and you know today what the future requirements would be if you ever wanted to take advantage of that. And if I were you, if I were a wise commissioner, I would make sure my emergency manager totally got into determining match and be an expert on how to match these programs. There's a concept out there called global match, which I'm not even going to touch because the provisions of it have changed since I have been at the state, but there are ways to do it. But you need to get somebody actively engaged in figuring out and seeing other counties' examples of how this program was taken advantage of, absent of hard cash up front. So there are ways to go about getting this program funded. It's your bread and butter. When it comes to mitigation, it is your bread and butter. The wisest of counties will take advantage of this 406 program. Now the cash match kicks in. Now you're down to 12.5% match. This is a function of, when you think about FEMA and they come in and they help put the infrastructure back, this is that program. This is the public assistance program. This one is section 406. Way different than 404. 406 is go repair that bridge that was damaged. And to prevent the damage from happening again next time, let's put in an abutment. Because the scouring effect is what caused the damage to start with. And if we had this abutment, next time we wouldn't incur that damage. That added cost into that scope of work is matched now by the state at 12.5% because it's under this 406 program. Very, very important to understand these differences. This program is very specific to the damaged thing. Calhoun County, you're forever blowing out the culverts under your dirt roads. I don't know how many times I've been over there looking at dirt roads in Calhoun County with Sonny O'Brien yapping in my ear. This is a major thoroughfare. Sonny, it's a dirt road. It's a major thoroughfare down in Bay County. I said, okay. Well, what did we do? Sonny was amazing that he would get some of these dirt roads paved. And it made sense because of the number of times that dirt road had washed out, the number of times Calhoun County, state of Florida, and FEMA had to go in and repair it. He was able to make that case and get that funding. The most obvious thing that I can think of is if the road is washed out because of an undersized culvert, don't just put the same size culvert back, put a bigger one in. That extra increase over exactly what was there before to something that would mitigate future damages, that is this. That's 406 mitigation. You can write that into your project worksheet, which is basically the scope of work. Now, here's the real kicker. For those counties who don't understand this and who don't take the time to put your own local engineer on these assessment teams, I'm guaranteeing you FEMA is not going to go out of their way to find these kind of opportunities for you. They are there to cost contain the damage and the repairs. They are not there to look for opportunities for you to mitigate your local damages. Counties who do not participate in the damage assessment process have no clue about this because you're not there. You're not your local ombudsman. And I don't know how many counties, I've been into every single county of this state many times after disasters. For those counties who put their local engineer or their contract engineers or somebody, I don't care if it's your local planner, on these damage assessment teams, with this knowledge, you can come out so far ahead of those who don't. The state of Florida doesn't have enough people to send out on every damage assessment team, and really they really don't even have time to do that. It's your damage in your county or your municipality. It is up to you to take advantage of this program. And I can't make that I can't say that strongly enough. I think one particular county, Marion County, my goodness, they got on it. They went out there, they put their local engineers on teams. They came out way ahead. You know, for my poster child for small counties, when I was in DEM, I always pointed to Calhoun County. Little bitty county, I've never seen proportionate to their damages. That county racked in more mitigation dollars than any of their neighbors because Sonny O'Brien understood this and knew how to leverage the system for the benefit of his county. Now that, to me, is somebody who understands this program for the benefit of your county. And you as commissioners ought to make sure that somebody at your level understands this 406 provision in the law. It's a wonderful thing. Okay? It can do all kinds of stuff. You know, obviously it's going in behind. It can take you to Code Plus on a roof. Don't just repair the windows, put them back with storm-resistant glass instead of the glass that was there to start with. Don't just rebuild the beat-up structure, build it back with hurricane clips. All of that extra stuff is now cash matched at 12.5% by the state. So now you're up to 87.5% free money. You're kicking in the 12.5%. So that, and again, that can be through a variety of in-kind matches. So I'm not necessarily saying it has to be hard cash. So enough time spent on the HMGP. Like I said, it is a very, very good program. Let's go to the next one, and then we'll stop and take questions because they're both very similar. Let's finish out 406. There's no limitation on the amount of money that you ask for as long as it passes what's called a benefit cost ratio. you've got to show a one-to-one displacement of costs. It's got to benefit one-to-one. It can't be less than a one-to-one benefit. And FEMA has to approve these extra enhanced mitigation measures that are put into your project worksheets. But if you do your homework right and you write it up right, there should never be an issue with that. Next one, and here's where you're talking about safe rooms, the question that came up earlier. The pre-disaster mitigation program, that's not the only program you can use for safe rooms, but it is one of the ones. Now this one is a little bit, not a little bit, a whole lot harder to take advantage of because it's kind of hard to get. How this program works, the director at the time of FEMA was James Lee Witt. And again, through a national organization called NEMA, National Emergency Management Association, he was lobbied heavily to say, look, James Lee, all of this sounds really nice and fluffy, but we've got to get creamed first to get any money. What about giving us some money ahead of time so that we can do some of these wonderful things in the mitigation world before the storm hits? So under his watch, this PDM program was created, Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program. It is to fund projects before the event. Where you go and find the projects you want to fund? Your LMS. That should be where you go to in order to find eligible projects that you want to propose be funded. This is a nationally, it's a program that's competitive across the nation. I have been told, I know when I was at the state, we used to get several $1 million a year in PDM funding. And those local who got the money, how it works is you submit, the state will ask for your submission of projects. They will package them together, and that then becomes the state submission to FEMA for review. So FEMA will look at that, make their determination on what is fundable, what is not, and then if we win that award, the state wins that award, and money comes back, the state gives the money back to the locals. So it's not as clear-cut as these other programs, but it's one that's out there. And you can do all kinds of interesting things with the PDM, but it's similar, very similar to the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, except it's something that kicks in before the disaster strikes. Again, this is a local match only. This is a 25% local match, 75% FEMA. And again, the match requirements are, it doesn't always necessarily mean hard cash, but you have to show that you have somehow come up with a 25% non-federal share. Counties can apply for up to $3 million per project. So it's you know what, if you don't try, I'm going to tell you, your chances of getting one of these things are not nearly as good as perhaps some other programs. But if you don't try, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So even if you resubmit the same project every year, you know, you've done the homework one time, but you keep trying until perhaps one year you get the money to do the work. So this program has fluctuated through the years. Gosh, when it first came out, it was just a handful of million. Then it bloomed up to 100 million a couple of years ago. I think now it's down to about 40 or 50 million. Is that right? Oh, it's not even mentioned next year, but that's, you know, I've seen that happen many, many times. It completely lined out, and last-minute efforts through NEMA, they put it back in. The 1 year that I was around, it was lined out. They put it back in at 100 million. So just because it may not be around or mentioned, that doesn't mean that it's gone away, because it's been in that boat many times before. All right, we better stop here for questions before we get into this next one, because I know this is technical, complicated stuff. So any questions on HMGP, 404, 406, or PDM? Yes, sir.
These funds are only available for local governments only?
Primarily, yes. Yes, they're funds that are allocated to, but, you know, a part of a local government may be a municipality. Is that where you're coming from?
Well, non-profits.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Non-profit can apply?
But it's done through the county, correct?
Usually.
Usually it's through the county. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question, and as a new commissioner, I'm trying to get up to date on a lot of stuff here quite quickly, and I have been involved in reading through and meeting with that emergency manager to review what this really, what the plan is, how it's laid out and everything, to make sure that we're pretty tight. Going back to the comment you had on the public assistance program under section 406.
Yes.
You made a comment about dirt roads being paved, and that's something right now that we are grappling with as a county, and it's going to be a critical issue very shortly. I've been a proponent of let's get them paved with what money we have right now, because we stand a chance of maybe getting some federal assistance if something happens. At the same time, there's some other reasons why we can, if we can get them paid, we can look at some other stuff from Scrap and Scott thing. But go back and give me the rhetoric that you just said about having them paid. It betters our chance of getting recognized for the public assistance program or what?
No,
Frank, before you
I'm
answer
sorry.
that,
Yes.
I don't know what the microphone placement is up there, but it was that question sort of faded in and out, so it might be useful if you
Okay.
paraphrase what that question was before you answer it, if you
The
can.
question is from a commissioner from Jefferson County, and he is asking the language that I talked about in terms of paving dirt roads under the 406 program. Really more detail about how does that work. All right, let's get real. FEMA doesn't like to pave dirt roads. They do not like to pave dirt roads. You have to make an extraordinary case to prove that over time, and if you don't have records, if your road department has not kept records of maintenance and costs and occurrences, don't even go down this road. But if you do have those records, and you can prove the point, this road washes out every time there's a thunderstorm, much less a hurricane. The best option that I've seen happen many times is raising the level through limestone fill, or whatever the base is, raising it and putting culverts in, as opposed to paving it. But I've seen both. Your chances of getting a dirt road paved under these programs, I'm not going to lie to you, are slim. Are slim. The reason that Calhoun County was able to take advantage of it is because they had an expert on staff that knew how to leverage the programs. And they had documentation that went back far enough. When the benefit-cost ratio was done, they couldn't deny the math. It makes sense to do something about this stretch of road, because over time it is costing the federal government way more than this immediate outflow of cash would cost in terms of pay. So that's what I'm saying about paving the dirt roads. It is not something that you're going to get under pre-disaster mitigation. Don't even go there. It would make sense that it would be an eligible project, but I'm not aware of a single project that's ever been awarded for paving dirt roads under that program. But it can be done cleverly under your 404, 406 programs, but you really got to have an ironclad case. Okay? Any more questions?
Are there any questions in Hendry County?
No, not at this time.
Okay, and what about Taylor County?
We're okay at this time.
Okay, Frank, we'll turn it back over to you then.
Okay, thank you, sir. We're 3/4 of the way through this effort here. It is 11:17. We've been at this now for another hour. Why don't we take a 10-minute break starting now, come back at let's say 11:30, and we'll wrap it up in the last half hour. So go ahead and take a break until 11:30, and then we'll wrap this up.
We're sending back here, and if we're having a conversation, is that sensitive enough to speak to you? Not very long. Okay, that's what I just wanted to make sure. Because happens always happens all the time. You know, I tell you what, it's becoming difficult here. It's difficult in order to find a American citizen who's applying for that.
Well, I wanted to go into grad.
Chinese are flooding the market.
I wanted to see if I could get into maybe a graduate program, but I didn't know what I wanted, exactly what I wanted to do yet. So.
You know,
But I want to do it. I need to do it more on some of it online anyway.
we've got so that we only pretty much fund unless it's grant projects to the CCCs. But we've also adapted to, it's called an MAD program, and it's a program similar to MBA, except it's more specific to agriculture and natural resources. And you can fish it in about 15 or 18 months, and tuition costs are like, I don't know, $15,000 for it.
Oh,
And so we get 25 students who apply to that and come and fully fund that and read themselves. But we're right now, we're running 75 graduate seats. But I don't think last year, I think maybe we had one domestic applicant. And this year I think we just had a couple.
Do they get in?
Usually, but I mean,
Can I be considered a minority status?
seems like males ought to be falling in that category.
White males?
But, you know, I know the thing, we've been doing econometrics interviews, economics is termed so mathematical. And we interviewed, we had 130 applicants from all over the United States and the world. We asked 4 to come for interviews. 3 were Chinese. They're all masters and PhD trained in the U.S., but 3 were Chinese and 1 was Russian. And the Russian has dual citizenship. But, you know, and my best guess, sort of looking through those packets, is if 3 or 4% of the 130, more than a handful, probably were not American born American speaking. Wow.
That's what I told my wife when even when I went to college, for my undergrad, and I got my undergrad in management information systems, business degree, and it was amazing. They should have given me minority status. I mean, even 10 years ago, it's just. I was, a white male. Is as scarce as anything else.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what we're all doing. Although you probably don't have that much of a problem with white males in undergraduate school.
Actually, we've got the largest black minority enrollment in college or any department part of them is that they don't want to go through the hassles of the business school, so we'll do it in our department. And then if there's something over there really interesting, they can go over and look at it. And we require some of the same accounting as the business school does, but we don't use that one big class of field like normally it's that third commissioner class where everybody, you know, good grades and B and we fail a lot of people and people get them multiple times and stuff like that. I think part of it's that, and then it's killing us now because we've got so many fewer people that we've really resisted, especially for senior level classes, going to graduate students or really large classes. So we want to
Yeah, that's
get to
not
know
good.
the professors, we want
Yeah.
professors to get to know them.
I enjoyed my last probably 18 months of school the best. Other than that, it was fairly monotonous in lecture halls and, you know 5 times the size of this.
Well, and you know, we'll teach some classes.
When we really get into that senior year, the meat of the actual degree and programming and language development and, you know, some visual basic stuff and, you know, app development and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and then you get into the strategic financials and stuff. That's where it got good.
We'll do 4 25-person sections before we do one 100-person section, and it'll be taught by a professor.
Right. Yeah, I didn't like the grads. I thought that was miserable, and I thought it was, quite frankly, a complete cop-out for my dollar.
So anyway, you know, I think those are some of the reasons that we attract some more.
Mm-hmm.
So who's running for Stone Soup?
I think it's up to about 6 or 7 folks. So it's a rather large.
Is he still planning to run for state legislature?
He is. Yeah, he doesn't even have any opposition yet. Republican. So I think he'll just walk into that. I mean, at this point, he's on the breeze coast for that. That'll be easy for him.
So now this class today will finish up your CCC.
I've got one more elective to take at the annual. When I guess I graduate or something.
So do you think you'll try that advanced commissioner class?
I don't know. The other commissioners have. I want to make sure that I get plugged into some board or committee or something after this.
Yeah, they use a lot of the advanced committee or advanced commissioner class graduates to be the policy chairs, to be on committees and stuff like that. And actually, Marion County's always.
Well, Kathy's in line to be the president. So I beat Barbara Feitos, and I guess she was in like the line, and or something like that. Someone told me that, and so I really don't know how this organization works on the top.
The way how it works is, and they do plan out, but they have the president, the incoming president, and the first and second vice presidents. They tend to go up, but people get beat. But you know, you have to plan out quite a bit in advance.
Well, Barbara loved that stuff,
Yeah.
and I, quite frankly, don't as much, you know. Although that I think some of the stances that FAC has had have been a little on the wimpy side, you know, in respect to some of the things that I think they could lobby for and really do a better job of. But anyway, Kathy's on that, whatever that senior board is, I guess, or
The executive board.
the executive board. And so, because Barbara was on that, and so we had a placement, we put Kathy on it when we got elected.
Yeah, she goes in there and, you know, to actually be considered for an officer, you have to get a letter of endorsement from the board.
Oh, okay.
And there are some people whose boards will endorse them.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so I think she does a nice job. One of the issues I think that I would love to see FAC take up, though, is they need to take up, when you guys did the training on some public record stuff, some sunshine law stuff, and with the evolution of technology, those laws, in my opinion, are outdated, and you know, Facebook stuff, all that stuff needs to and that needs to be done through an organization like FAC on behalf of the commissioners.
They've tried to do a little bit more social media stuff, but they haven't
really done
a bunch.
They've surely not done enough in this day and age of how fast that's happening, how fast the campaigning and all that stuff's taking place. And quite frankly, it'd be better to have our folks working on it, because at least commissioners can have input on it then. But I think the FAC really needs to push that in the next couple of years here. I think it's been a lack not to have done that.
Well, and that's why they have those fall meetings in September, where they come over the policy statements and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So a few people
I need to get on
bring
that.
it to their attention. Being at those things can make a difference. But Marion County, not all the commissioners, but a lot of them have gone with CCC or ACC. But the ACC class is sort of the same. You're talking about, the concept was, when we started, we wanted to keep about 25. And because some people have actually started it when they lost the election, or the next election, they went complete. So they sort of moved to where they put the maximum class size at 30. It's the same group of people of 30 who are at 3-day-and-a-half seminar type things, but right now all have the right to Gainesville. So they end up spending 33 hours together, and they get to know each other. There's a lot more, since you'll have classes 40 and 50 and sometimes 60. The first time I did the in-person orientation, I had over 100 people. And of course, that was a backlog from them not having had one before. But you can do a lot more with smaller classes, and people develop more, and you can challenge people in the thought process, and they can challenge you. So.
Well, I still think that you guys need to have that ethics class right in that window when people get elected to actually being seated.
Well, what they're doing is the ethics, they've done twofold. And
Because I'll tell you what, that sunshine law is a beast.
So did you take it up in Tallahassee?
I took it here.
Took it here.
Well, no, I took the ethics in Tallahassee, but I took the sunshine law initial training in Gainesville.
Yeah, some of the little, but they decided on some of that stuff, and I hate saying that. But the ethics one, that they do in Tallahassee, is they're bringing people out of the ethics office. But, there's so many shady things that they let get through. And they're sort of wishy-washy. I mean, George Kirkpatrick, who used to be state senator from this area, he had a building down there on the way up. He got named as executive director in the independent colleges and universities in Florida, of which they were paying him $6-figure salary. He was also chairman of the Senate Education and Appropriations Committee, and he's allocating state dollars to independent colleges and universities.
Okay, if we can get everybody corralled back together. I wanted to spend a little extra time on these first three programs because they're the most important to you. Now, we're going to go pretty quickly through the rest of this presentation, but you've got this material, you've got the handout, you've got points of contact. If you're interested, please take advantage of the opportunity to go ahead and dig down deep yourself, or have your emergency management do that, because they pretty much know this, but I'm telling you, they really need to know this, because this is the kind of stuff that makes or breaks your ability to take advantage of some of these funds. The RCMP, Residential Construction Mitigation Program, after the hurricanes, after Andrew, and especially after the 04-05 hurricanes, there was a push, as you know, the insurance debacle that happened in the state. The state became Creative Citizens Insurance in order to keep the IRS off the back of Citizens Insurance, because they needed to build up a reserve of money that was not taxed. The trade-off was to create the RCMP program to demonstrate a public use of some of these funds. So money was siphoned out of the insurance, catastrophic insurance trust fund to fund the RCMP. And it was done in order to keep them out of hock with the IRS. It's a wonderful program. And we have the program administrator brand new to the program here today, which is a great program to take advantage of. You can see some of the things that it does. It does some pretty good things. It can retrofit buildings, provide public outreach for wind mitigation. Everything that you do under this program has to be up to current code, obviously the Florida Building Code. The award comes out annually. Counties are notified, I believe. There's a notice of availability of funding that goes out to every county for these funds that can be used. This is the breakdown of approximately, now that changes annually, but this year this is what the numbers are. You can use these amounts of money for the funds, or you can apply for grants and up to these thresholds right now. No match requirement, yay hey, but these things are scored on a point evaluation. They create a committee, the committee reviews these things. If you demonstrate local match, obviously your points go up. So it behooves you to show some kind of match, although hard cash dollars are not required for this program. The benefit to the state is very impressive. You can use this money to, again, it's just another program in your arsenal to help fight this mitigation issue. The next one, many of you are going to know about the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grants. They have a special emergency program that can kick in. I'm not here to talk about CDBG as most of you know it. I'm here just to inform you that there is normally an emergency allocation that can be made. What I have seen historically, CDBG, Congress also gets on the bandwagon and wants to help. Our congressional leadership will often go and craft up what's called a supplemental appropriation to put extra dollars somewhere to the benefit of the impacted community. Most often, the housing mechanism for that pot of special appropriations is in the CDBG program. You then, as commissioners, administer this program. After you've developed it, you've got to tell them why you want this money through an action plan. But once you get this money, it's pretty nice. You can do a lot of cool things. I've seen CDBG used for a lot of very interesting things in the past. So understand how this works. Okay, that's step number one. And realize that many times after an emergency, this money comes available. The one that's really notable to me was after Hurricane Georges. Congress just had to do something beyond and above what FEMA was doing. So they allocated about $30–40 million, I believe, some amount of money in the millions for the Keys, Monroe County, to mitigate and go beyond what FEMA was doing down there. And they used that money to do a lot of really cool things. They put sewer systems in. They just did some things that FEMA can't do because of eligibility issues. So understanding this program and that this pot of money can become available to you is really, really important for local counties. Again, I've already talked about it being a supplemental thing, and it's the key word there is got to meet your unmet needs. You as a local government has to demonstrate why these other programs I'm talking about, I'm really not even talking about your recovery programs. These are mitigation, but you have to show why your recovery programs have not put you back whole, and you need an extra pot of money to make you whole again. That's what's called an unmet needs allocation. So they will use that magic word, unmet need, when they allocate this money. Benefit for the county, hey, it's money that you didn't have to start with. It's really good stuff to have around. So understand how it works, and then when a disaster strikes, whoever handles your CDBG, and every one of you have somebody in your county, and they should, whoever your CDBG administrator is, they should understand this program. Make sure that they're fully up to abreast on how to engage during a disaster the supplemental appropriations that will be coming down the pike. The SHIP program, again, every one of you have a SHIP administrator in your counties. The interesting thing about the SHIFT program is unused or unallocated dollars can be shifted around and focused on an impacted county. That's the nice thing about SHIP. And these last two, SHIP and CDBG, can also be used as your local match. It is a funding source for match. That 25% I keep harping about, these programs lose their, well, SHIP is not even a federal program, but the CDBG loses its federal identity in your county. So it can be used as a provision of match for some of those other programs I was talking about. Again, here's the details of where the program is housed in state statute. And what I focused on here today is just this emergency provision that's in that statute right there. So again, it's just something that you should be aware of. It exists. And if you don't know how to take advantage of it, you won't. So make sure you take advantage of it. The SHIP money comes to you under emergency rule. It used to be in the old days that the Division of Housing and Community Development within the Department of Community Affairs would do this. We would often approach them in emergency management because there were 3 divisions at the time in DCA. Growth Management, the Housing Division, and Emergency Management. Emergency Management, they were on the 3rd floor. I would always trop up to the 3rd floor and say, hey, we need you to look at your SHIP allocations and see what we can do to help the XYZ impacted counties. And the guy that was there at the time, the administrator of the program, was very agreeable to do that. So having that working relationship at the state level greatly benefited the locals, impacted counties through the use of these SHIP funds. So again, it's just, this one is a state program that can be used for a variety of things. Disaster-related purposes. It can be used for wind mitigation projects. All right, most of you, especially you commissioners, you're fully aware of the WAP program, the Weatherization Assistance Program. This was one of the stimulus package programs that the federal government implemented. This program went from basically a couple of $1 million a year overnight to over $100+ million a year for the state of Florida. And the majority of which, almost all of that money, headed to your county. And in your county, it went to your community action programs or some entity. They, in turn, contracted contractors to go out and weatherize some of your poorest substandard housing units. And the reason I know a little bit that I do about this program is we, the Disaster Strategies and Ideas, the company I work for, have the contract to go in now and inspect the work that was done by the local contractors using the weatherization funds to verify that those funds were used appropriately and to sign off on the final documentation. So it has been a tremendous program up to this point. It is scheduled to run down, I believe, around June, something like that. But who knows? The Weatherization Assistance Program has been around as long as LIHEAP, the Low Income Energy Assistance Program. Those of you that understand these two programs set aside to help your poorest of the poor in your county. This was a wonderful program because it would do stuff around windows. It would strengthen doors. You could strengthen roof structures, connections. So it could do some pretty cool wind mitigation things. But it's not necessarily something that came, through the coffers of the county. It was more the homeowner got these funds from the state to your cap to the homeowner. So, but it was there. It's still there. The average, you could have got a grant up to $5,600. The average allocation is $2,600 for local residents. There's no match required for this program. And here's what it can be used for there at the bottom. Windows, doors, roofs, ceilings. Obviously, those types of structures are impacted by wind. So this program was by default, it wasn't set up to be a wind mitigation program, but by default, what it allowed for the proper use of the money, became a wind mitigation program. So it was just another thing that you should be aware of that was going on in your county. Now, summary. All of these programs taken together, how much money were we talking about? This was something that Eric was very, very insistent that we put in here. He said, most of you are going to be interested in, give me a lump sum, show me the money. Well, this is the money. RCMP is $3.5 million, give or take, so annual appropriation. PDM this year was $40 million. You heard Laura say it's not even in the books next year, but don't write it out. It's been there many times before. Weatherization, $175 million. I mean, it literally went from a couple of million to this, almost overnight. HMGP for just the 04-05 storms generated $451 million, all of which was spent in your communities. I hope that you were aware of that. 406, that program I talked about, $118 million above and beyond the repairs to put Humpty Dumpty back on the wall again, to put him higher on the wall. The difference between the wall and his new elevation generated $118 million of extra money. So these are some big numbers. CDBG, SHIP, and HOME all used for local cash match. Pretty nice. And when you see it all at a glance. Here's the dollars, amounts. Most of you were probably around during the 04 and 05 events. The DR just stands for disaster. FEMA assigns a disaster number to every declared disaster. That's just the FEMA number. You can actually go online on the FEMA website and pull that number up, and it'll give you all kinds of information about these storms. But you can look at the dollars and the amounts that are generated by storm. Put your thinking caps on. You know which storm you were impacted by. Did you get your fair share of that amount of money? Or were you not even aware that it was out there? That's the benefit of this course. You are now aware that these kinds of dollars exist. They're real. And for those of you that have proactive programs at your county level, get the highest bang for the buck for these dollars. Those of you that do not engage in this process, you don't get this money. It's fair and simple. All right, this is the HMGP, that other program I talked about. When you took that 20% number, I was saying you multiply all the disaster damage by 20%, that's the numbers it created. This was money that went back to the counties to fund the projects on your LMS. $451 million in 2 years in Florida to Florida counties. That's significant. You can do a lot with that kind of money. And of course, you're required to match. There's only two things here I'm going to real briefly touch on. The CCCL line, obviously if you're a coastal county, you've got this line of the CCL line. It was created many years ago by the ancient DNR, Department of Natural Resources, later became DEP. It's managed and controlled by DEP. It is a zone of special consideration. You can build seaward of that line, but the requirements are much, much higher. You can impact that by saying, looking at those requirements and say, well, we want to take it a step higher. Now, you could do that if you wanted to. Most of you probably won't do that, but it's within your authority to do that. If you wanted to take it higher, you can. You can always take it higher, you can't take it lower. In most all of these zoning things, you can always go higher, but you can't go lower. There's no money in the CCL line. It's just a line that's put there that you have to pay attention to in your county. Florida Building Code, this is the latest, greatest wind map that I pulled out of the 2010 version. Greatly different from the 2007-ish version. That's the current version of the wind map, and there's all kinds of maps in there when you start really looking at it. They're also set up by tiers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending on the type of construction put you in, and the congregate nature of that structure puts you in one of those 4 tiers. And each tier has its own wind zone classifications. I believe this one is for 3 and 4, which is where most of your construction would fall into. Again, I'm a big proponent for building codes. I think over time, they can have the biggest bang for the buck. It takes all the heat off of you. You're simply there to enforce it and not waive the requirements. I don't even know if you can waive the building code requirements, like sometimes you can do in a flood insurance program. But all the heat's off of you. The heat's on this. And you have to build the current code for current or new construction. And when you build it, all of the wind mitigation aspects of our state were taken into consideration. So any new construction should be built to withstand the wind mitigation thing. And I had a really interesting statistic here that I wanted to read to you about an analysis that was done after one of our recent storms. That's not it. It basically says those houses that were built to current code did far, far better than those that were built to pre-code standards. And I think specifically in Charlotte County, I remember they came in and did an analysis after Charlie in 2004. And it was amazing because I was with them when they were looking at these houses. I mean, two-code house, minor damage. Sub-code house, completely destroyed. Side by side, so they got the same impacts. But the one built to code sustained very little damage. And that's what they have historically been able to see all over the place when they've done these post-assessment analyses about the impact of the code on disasters. It really is working. Well, yeah, there's no money associated with the code, but who enforces this code? You do. These are codes that are enforced through your zoning folks, through whoever you've got at your local level to enforce this, your building inspectors, your building department. They're the ones who enforce the Florida Building Code. So obviously, it behooves a local government to be totally on top of this. One digressing war story, you've all heard about the Southern Building Code that was in place in Dade County during Andrew. And I was a part of this assessment that went out and looked at why in these communities was this one totally gutted and the one across the street was totally okay. It was all about the inspection of the code. There was nothing wrong with the Dade County code going into Hurricane Andrew. It was one of the best that there was. Nationally, it was tough, but the enforcement of it was laxed. So it was not built to code because the enforcement arm of it, which was controlled by the county, Dade County, was substandard. So even though the code was great, the enforcement of it was substandard. So that's where you guys kick in, making sure that the current code is fully adhered to so you don't get yourself into that jam. Success stories, just to quickly whet your appetite of what you can do. Delray Beach Old School Square Cultural Center, what they did there was it was impacted by one of the events, and they put this really cool, these windows, the window framing, the window structure, and the glass that was put in there was very, very different than what was there before. And this kind of money was able to retrofit an existing facility to make it wind resistant for the future and forevermore. So theoretically, a storm of equal or greater value that caused the initial damage would not cause the same damage again, therefore mitigating those impacts. That's just one very small example. Another one is Tampa General Hospital. This went on and on and on. These are just two pictures that I robbed off of a publication that DEM sent me. But they did the same thing. They did some window cladding, some window enhancements. They elevated all of the air conditioning and all of the mechanical stuff on the roof. So they didn't build the hospital. What they did was took an existing structure and made it better. So that's kind of what you got to keep in mind when you think about these dollars. It's not to go out and build something brand new from scratch. It's to take something that is current and make it better. And that's what they were able to do in those two structures there. So just an example of what you can do. It's a big hospital, 1,018 beds, 6,900 employees, and it's very close to the water. So now it's going to be, they made it much more resistant than what it was before. As we wrap up, I hope that today you walking away here with a much greater understanding of these programs, these plans, and these provisions in state statute, so that you are at least dangerously armed and educated enough to get yourself in trouble when you start talking wildly about these programs. My final concluding remark is, I am begging you, please do take the time, contact either one of these two very good people, Miles Anderson or Eric Poole, for further information, for anything that you felt like we have left out, not done a good job of doing. And most importantly, you will be asked later on down the road, because you're in a teleconference and you're not going to do it today, but there is an evaluation of the program that we hope that you will take the time to fill out, because your comments will help us make this a better course and more productive for future students. So I appreciate it. If any final issues, questions? I know it's getting close to lunchtime.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, folks, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to have been able to come here and share these very, very important programs with you.
Frank, let's see if there's questions in other counties for us. Rod, do you want to?
Sure. Are there any questions in Glades County?
Well, Hendry County. I have a
Hendry
question.
County, excuse me.
Thank you. Where's the evaluation form?
It's going to be emailed to you.
Oh, okay. Not a problem then.
It's an electronic survey.
Okay, no problem. I also have one other question. Will this presentation be offered again? If we have the ability at our Emergency Operations Center to have this course again, are we able to do that?
Through the grant with DEM, we have 4 regional workshops in the next month and a half. We're going to offer it at Escambia County, St. Johns County, Charlotte County, and Broward County. And we welcome attendance at that also from any other counties.
I would ask.
Does that answer the question? And if you need more if you need more information on these workshops, contact Eric Poole. His number was on that last slide that Frank sent.
And
okay, we'll do
Latrez,
that.
I'll just add to, like we've done on this previous ones, there's a recording of Frank's presentation and his PowerPoint that we'll have a couple of CDs that we will send to Eric and you guys up at the Association of Counties. And I always keep a copy down here in Gainesville or try as well. And if something doesn't fit, but it's valuable enough, or there's small groups, or they're not concerned with commissioner certification credit or stuff like that, I'm just going to say, let you be aware that we did that again today.
Thank you, Rod. Who is it in Glades County, in Hendry County that was asking?
This is Amy. I'm with the Emergency Management Office.
Okay, Amy, we'll get back in touch with you also on those. But we do have them available. We do have them available, and our hope is to get all of this information on our website. However, I will let you know that we are having storage capability issues on our website, so it will be a little while before we're able to store all of these wonderful webinars that we've been doing here.
Is there any questions in Taylor County?
We have 8.
There's that problem.
Taylor County doesn't have any questions.
Okay, and Commissioner Zalick, you didn't? Okay, Commissioner Zalick is good here in Gainesville. So I guess there's no other questions. And I'm going to let Latrez have the final word, but we thank you for participating. We thank Frank for a great presentation and some dynamic slides to go with it. It summarized a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. I want to thank Glenn and Ron here in Gainesville for providing technical staff, Russell up in Quincy. And I also want to say a special thanks to Fred Vose, who made sure this happened over in Taylor County. And we appreciate all of you participating. And if you don't get a chance to get out to the IFAS facilities, the UF facilities in your county, get out a little bit more often. And Latrez, with that, I'll let you and Eric have the final word.
Okay, Eric has a question.
Yeah, Frank, if I could, just a program question. It's something that often comes up that we hear from counties after a big wind event is, are any of the programs that you talked about today eligible for undergrounding utilities? I mean, that was a big thing after Wilma down in Broward County, and maybe our partners at DEM can answer that. That's one. The other one is the traffic signals, whether or not you can use the sort of the common things that you're seeing now, which are very expensive, but that typically comes up. Are any of the programs eligible for that if they are?
The problem with the underground, we went through this when I was over there. What we ran into is you could not get it to meet the benefit cost ratio. It is horribly expensive to bury cable, and then all of the things that are the access to the cable. And we could never get it to pass the VC, and that's why we never tried.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, I know you're ready to go eat some lunch, so I'll let you go with that. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Frank, for a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Dr. Klauser, for all your help and all the different IFAS Extension Offices. We really appreciate all of your help in making this happen. Again, the survey will be emailed to you by Friday at the latest. Please give us feedback. Our next 4 workshops that are part of our grant through DEM are in Escambia County, St. Johns County, Charlotte, and Broward. And again, they're open to everyone, not just those individual counties, but we'll actually have these, will not be webinars, they'll be actual workshops in these different counties that you're welcome to attend. So your feedback helps us with that. We definitely want to thank the Florida Division of Emergency Management for allowing us to do these workshops, and also wanted to alert you that or save the date for our annual conference, June 19th through the 22nd in Orange County, has already gone out. More conference publicity will be out around March 15th, and we hope that you will join us then. You can get 12 CCC credits during that conference. Thank you all. Have a great Thursday afternoon. Travel safe.